Go ahead and get started. All right, looks like we are good. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for jumping on. I am Amanda Maureen, National Account Manager who supports Matthews International. We have a couple of guests today to join us and talk through some stuff. We have Justrite as well as Accuform. And today we are going to be discussing chemical storage, flammable cabinets, and then HAZCOM labeling as well. So feel free to jump in and ask questions as you have them. I'm going to be recording and then putting this on YouTube as always for those of you who want to go back to the content or anybody who's not able to join live. So give me just a couple hours after the call and that content will be live, and I'll be sending out an email as well as any supporting material that we discussed today. So Matt from Justrite, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Amanda, thanks so much for having us. Everybody, I'm Matt Smith. I'm the regional sales manager for the Justrite Safety Group. I'm here in Texas. I heard Duke's out of San Antonio, so I definitely understand the heat you're going through, sir. Today, what we're going to go through on my segment is chemical storage. We're looking at the safety cabinets and the cans, all things for the Justrite Safety Group. We're also going to have a couple of things at the end of how we can best support the Grainger team and the Matthews International as well at your facilities. So high level, what we're going to go through today, kind of the safety cabinets and safety cans on your compliance through some OSHA, IFC, NFPA, different types of cabinets and cans, the colors, what they mean, and some hazard identification, which I know Phil Z will speak more to that here in just a bit. For safety cabinets, there's a number of different features. I'm not going to go through all of these because everyone's pretty well aware of a lot of these, but some of the key things that I'd like to point out that help in the event of a fire is these double wall with 1.5 inch airspace. Oftentimes what we see at these facilities is there are dents in the cabinets or someone has stacked heavy things on top of those. That may not give you the full amount to get out if a fire were to break out. The other part I wanted to mention too is these are fire tested by a third party called FM for 325 degrees for 10 minutes. That allows you the 10 minutes to get out. So if your cabinets are not in compliance, you may not get that full amount. Another big piece, which we'll touch on more in just a bit, is in some states, a lot of places are going towards self-closing cabinets versus manual close cabinets. We'll come back to that here in just a bit, but as you can see, the OSHA, IFC, and NFPA, depending on what your fire marshal, AHJ, or authority having jurisdiction goes by, these could vary based on city, state, county, so it just depends. And then most of y'all, especially on the safety side, are very well aware of the colors, the codes, and the application. So high level on the colors of the cabinets, the yellow is obviously going to be your flammable liquids. You're looking at white for your flammable waste. Red is your paints and inks, aka combustibles, and then green for your pesticides. These will fit the OSHA, NFPA 1, NFPA 30, and then once again, FM approval is that third party organization that tests our cabinets out to make sure they're in good standing. The other one, which y'all may or may not be aware of, we have a lot of these are for laboratories, are also hazardous materials, anything from acids, bases, corrosives, flammable solids, and things like that. These will come in a royal blue or a light blue color. These will also come with a poly shelf that goes on top of our metal spill slope shelves. That's to prevent any kind of corrosives from corroding the metal shelves inside there. So once again, we'll hit some of the compliance as far as NFPA, IFC, and the Fire Code 1. Now, for those of y'all that obviously everyone here on the safety team in Grainger as well is familiar with SDS, oftentimes what we find is that when you're looking for your safety data sheets, more often than not, a lot of things have gone electronic, meaning that you've got those stored on your laptop, your desktop. Well, one thing we've just come out with is our SDS document boxes. What these do is in the event of a fire, instead of having to go back to your office to log in, find the actual document, print it, come back and administer first aid, you could have these printed off adhere to the side of the cabinet, which won't impact how the cabinet works in the field. And there's a couple different sizes. Once again, if you're not entirely sure if they should be together, we'd recommend storing those separately. Another piece which we have definitely helped out in mitigating some of the fires is our vapor trap filter. These are actually going to be magnetic. So this piece will adhere to the side of the cabinet, and this is actually one of our larger flame arresters. We'll talk about that in just a minute with what goes inside of our safety cans. In the event of a fire, basically what this would do is any kind of flames will not penetrate this mesh and light any kind of vapors that may be inside the cabinet or outside of the containers inside. Very handy little piece inside of there. One thing we get a lot of questions about is on venting. It's not required. And once again, going back to your national fire prevention, if you are not venting, use the bung hole seals. Each cabinet's going to come with one on the top right and one on the bottom left. A lot of facilities, when I go out with me and my team, is that some people may have removed those. And a big no-no is if you're pumping things through there. Once again, a big no-no there. Now, if you are venting, I've also seen some that are doing it incorrectly. They're working towards it, but they only have one side actually vented versus having both. We'd have air coming inside and then coming out. So a couple things you would need if you are venting it. You must direct it directly outdoors. And at the end of the day, using a professionally certified engineer. Grounding when required. That's our next slide we'll talk about is grounding and bonding. And then the blowers should be specified as hazardous or can shut down in a fire. So for example, if there are some chemicals, some VOCs that are leaking out, make sure you consult the engineer because for one, if there's certain things when air is coming in and coming out, you don't want to have some of that really nasty stuff leaking out, but just a small portion on venting. Grounding and bonding, another thing we get a lot of questions about. If you are not dispensing out of the cabinet, you don't need to vent the cabinet to ground and bond the cabinet. That's more of a best practice. But a lot of times, like when you go to your gas station, they tell you to touch something metal to disengage that static. It's basically putting all your objects at zero, so no potential of a static shock. So what you're going to do here is if you are dispensing out of the cabinet, you'll have to ground it to earth, little rod over here, and then bond this to the terminal. Each of our cabinets will have this grounding terminal here. Now, if you are dispensing, you'll make sure there's another cable inside that is connected or bonded to the cabinet and then bonded to the internal, maybe a 55-gallon drum. If you're dispensing into another container, you'll have one more cable. So really, in that instance, you'd have three of those. Make sure you have that static at zero potential. From there, I know we talked about self-closing door requirements. Once again, we have enough information, depending if they're going by International Fire Code, National Fire Prevention, OSHA, and so forth. A lot of places, a lot of people are going towards self-closing, primarily because it's a less hassle, less worry. Because for one, you don't have to hold this open or have to keep your it can slam shut in the event of a fire. What I would recommend, and generally what my team will do, is we'll recommend the self-closing cabinets because if a fire does break out, we have these little metal pieces that come with each cabinet called a fusible link. If a fire is to break out and the cabinet is in good working order, that piece will melt, the cabinet doors will shut, and that'll help you mitigate that fire. Now, depending on the states, once again, some of these don't have any requirements. Oklahoma, Kansas, Mississippi. If they don't, you can always go with a manual closed cabinet, but I would once again consult your authority having jurisdiction, generally your fire marshal, and they'll tell you based on county, city, state, what those requirements would be. In doing a little bit of recon, I think that Matthews does a little bit with lithium batteries, and if I'm incorrect, please correct me on that. We're actually working on developing a lithium battery storage cabinet. This is still very early on in the works, but we're gathering a lot of data as far as the failure modes, temperatures, damage assessment, suppression, and extinguishing. We have actually tested, there's a little video they showed us internally of how our existing cabinets work, but currently they're not approved. They are really doing a lot more research and testing, but that's one thing we are working on. So if that is something that Matthews is engaging in, that's something we could definitely loop y'all in for the future. Here are a couple of key things. What I'm gonna do is for the Grainger teams, the Matthews teams, y'all obviously are in the facilities a lot more than me, Mary, Phil, and the rest of us from the Justrite team, but some things to look for. And once again, we can submit this after the call. If your cabinets are damaged, if you're storing your chemicals incorrectly, wrong identification, if there's open hazardous containers or non-compliant emergency response. This is a perfect example. If you look at this, there is a hasp drilled on the front. That's a third-party modification. We didn't approve that, neither did FM. So if for some reason a fire breaks out and insurance determines this cabinet is the epicenter, y'all may not get the insurance money for that. That is a huge thing. You also notice on this one, this handle looks like it's almost coming off. You do have some corrosion on the outside of the cabinet. It's stored on a wooden pallet and there are things stacked on top. All of those may not allow the cabinet to function properly in the event of a fire. And then once again, as far as open no identified containers, I don't know if y'all deal with HPLCs or high performance liquid chromatography. If that's something we deal with, we have a perfect example here to help out. I have two more examples of some things to look for, and then we'll move on to cans. I'll give it over to Phil. Here are some, once again, prime examples. It looks like these cabinets are stored outside, a lot of corrosion on the outside. Someone probably lost the key to this cabinet and they drilled a hasp into the front. Once again, this corrosion may allow the cabinet to function properly, and that's a third-party modification. This one, I was very surprised when I saw this. I thought, wow, how many pallets and spilled pallets can we add in one location? Well, quite a few actually. This is wildly out of compliance. For one, egress. Two, you have a number of corrosion items, pallets. If I were to break out, this might be a huge accelerant. So just some things to look for in your own facilities. Were there any questions before I jump into safety cans? All right, jump into the next section. So those of you that have been in the industry for a bit are probably well aware of our safety cans as far as our type one, having one opening to pour into and to pour out of. And then type two means you have two openings, one where you pour your liquids into and one where you pour out of. Our DOT safety cans, that's Department of Transportation. We also have our plunger cans, bench, rinse cans, and tanks. This is our HPLC, and then oily waste cans. And an interesting fact for those that y'all didn't know, 1 gallon of gasoline has the same explosive power as 20 sticks of dynamite. Just let that sink in for a minute. That is pretty insane. I've been to a number of facilities in the last 4 years of me being here where I've seen plenty of these gas cans you would use at your house for your lawnmowers. Plastic is not OSHA compliant. So if you're in your facility and you notice, and I'm not calling anybody in maintenance out here, oftentimes I will find this in maintenance, sometimes in production, just depends on the area if they're filling up their different generators, different four-wheelers, things like that on site. What you would need is a closed container, liquid and vapor at extreme temperatures, not more than 5 gallons. Obviously, 5 gallons of liquid is very heavy. A spring closing lid and spout cover, something that will safely relieve internal pressure with fire exposure, and it's made of metal. With that being said, these are the three things that make your cabin safety can safe. For one, it relieves pressure. We call it a burp. So if a fire, let's say if it's hot in Texas, I think Duke was on the call in San Antonio. At certain temperatures, it'll burp at 3 to 5 psi. A self-closing lid, those of y'all that have these cans, when you pull this handle back, if it's in compliance, it's going to close immediately once you let go of the handle. And then much like that vapor trap filter, this little mesh screen, that flame arrestor, if a fire were to break out, it will not penetrate that screen and light the vapors on fire inside of the cabinet. And then very similarly to our cabinets, we have a couple different colors to kind of denote what's inside of the cans. The red, once again, is our most common, most manufactured can for gasoline. Blue is used frequently for your storage of kerosene. Yellow is going to be for your diesel fuels. And then green would be a storage of oils. Oftentimes we find that those in the pesticide or landscaping industry, they'll have a mixture for your weed eaters or weed whackers. So a couple different ways and a number of different sizes too. For those that would need a Department of Transportation can, these have the roll bars on there, and actually this little screw on both sides will screw the lid down so when you're driving around over the highways, different areas, it's not going to pop open and spill liquid out there. These will meet your DOT and HF 81 requirements, and then you have approved. This one I come across quite often, oily waste cans. Now, I will say a lot of facilities do have these in place. More often than not, what we'll see is red rags or the blue white balls that may just have any kind of, let's say, acetone or cleaner, MEK, things like that. I usually find those just kind of sitting around on machines that could be stacked in a 55-gallon trash can. Well, the thing is that there may be spontaneous combustion that happens depending on the different types of liquids or flammables that may be stacked. This is a great way to mitigate that. So once you drop these items inside of here, you take one of the legs off the fire triangle and really reduce the or mitigate the potential for a spontaneous combustion. And then once again, I won't spend a lot of time on this. I wasn't 100% sure if the Matthews team would deal with high performance liquid chromatography, but these were the only one on the market that makes the FMA approved container like this. To give you an example, these are your HPLC container machines. Basically, when they're filtering certain chemical solvents through here, the liquid waste will come through these thin tubes into these containers. Oftentimes, you'll see like an open carboy container. Those are not considered contained or safe, so they must be closed, not rupture or leak, and be approved to transport flammable liquids. From here, basically, if a fire were to break out, this would actually melt the the polyethylene and burn off the liquid inside. So really a fantastic product to help mitigate risks. Now, at the end of this, that's a lot of information I just threw at y'all. So what I want to do is tie this all back for the Grainger teams, for the Matthews teams. We have a number of ways that we can really pair it back with the GSAT, the government's survey assessment tool, or site assessment tool, excuse me. We have a study workplace safety survey. What we're going to do is there's no cost to Grainger, there's no cost to y'all to do this. What we're going to do is look at a couple different areas. That could be signs and tags, that could be flammable storage and spill containment, could be anti-fatigue matting, could be safety shower and eye wash. We're looking for any kind of toxic chemicals, if the floors are slippery, strain injuries, helping you really increase safety, reducing the risk of fire. Are there cabinets that are out of compliance? If there are cables that are out there, are there mats that are torn or broken or bunched up? Minimize your control exposures. And at the end of the day, we know that cost savings are key and important. So really, we want to help as far as optimizing inventory in your storage space. If there's a process improvement with a new or existing product, let's look at that. Really helping prevent fines from these industries or these regulation companies here. And then lastly, reduce your insurance premiums. And so the study, just to give you all an idea, these are all the different products and areas that we manufacture that Grainger supports y'all with in the field. High level for study, it's your standards and regulations, it's threat assessment and site vulnerability, the understanding. So those of you on the safety team, I think it's a wide array of y'all here. You know your facilities. Second set of eyes can generally help if we can. The documentation we provide, this next slide will give you an output. But basically, we'll take a look at what's going on. We'll note the recommendation, take pictures if they're allowed. That really helps kind of speak back to it. The product recommendation, if there's a severity level, if there is a compliance reference, and then lastly, we'll have a budgeting page. Very last thing, hey, here's all the items, here's the severity rating, if it's critical, important, or best practice. And there's no cost to do this. This is something that we can come on site. We don't charge you, we don't charge Grainger to do that, and really helps y'all hit that gap analysis and provide some additional layers here. This is my last slide, and then I'll stop talking. But basically, this is what the output would look like from going to one of your facilities. What we'll do is we'll put together this little page. It's hard to see here, but we have 3 different threat levels. Critical, there's a high likely for major or severe injury to people or property. Important, there's a moderate, and then best practice, there'll be minor to little incident there. What we'll do is we'll know where the area is, the severity rating, take our pictures. Are there mats? Are there IBC toes, no spill containment, red rags? They're just stacked full of different things. What it is, how to fix it, our products, any kind of compliance. And then for Grainger, if we have it in there, this is great for y'all, we'll have a Graingerized part number in there. And that's my time. Any
Thanks,
questions
Matt.
before?
Any questions? Hey, Matt, do you have PDFs with Grainger part numbers for both the flammable cabinets and the cans that you can share?
I do. Great question, Amanda. Were you at the Grainger show back in February?
I was.
So I need to find this. I have a Graingerized literature. And once I want to go too far over time, I have a Dropbox link. What I can do is it should have all Graingerized. Let me see if I've got it. I think it's right here. Let me take a look. Oops.
Yeah, if you could just get that
Sure
get that
will.
over to me, and then I'll get that out along with that presentation. If you can share that with me as well.
Absolutely.
Did you say that Phil had content as well?
He does.
I am here.
Oh, you're still out there. Okay.
I will. Yes,
All
I've
right,
been sitting
Phil.
here quietly.
Awesome. Well, we'll pass it to you, Phil.
All right, I will share my screen. Can that be seen by y'all?
We can see it.
All right, great. So not every screen is going to have all this text on here. So just to start out, it's hard to believe that hazard communication, the actual statute and law, has been around since 1983. I just wanted to highlight some key points out of these passages of the 29 CFR 1910-1200. That is the hazard communication standard for OSHA about the classification of hazards, chemicals that need to be communicated to employees and by the employers, as well as a program in place And I know our focus is going to be on labels, so there's a bigger universe of this. We'll see what we can do when we circle at the end here, and to talk about the other pieces, but our focus is on the labeling, as it were, or identifying the chemicals in the workplace. And then on top of that, about training, and as well as the explanation of the labels itself. Now, for those of you who are well aware of, hazard communication has been a top 10 OSHA violation for as long as any of us can remember. And last year is no exception. It came in number 2. Previous year was 5, but in previous several years, even before that, has been 2 too. So it has remained unchanged in many aspects of its positioning in the OSHA top 10. Unfortunately, it is where it sits over the course of the years. The area we're going to talk about, even though to identify from a hazard communication standpoint, there are 6 areas of which comprises the very high level summary here of the bullets here, of which what comprises hazard communication. As anybody who's ever had the novelty effort to go and read the 1200 standard, I can tell you it's great reading for insomniacs. So, but at the same time, it is chock full of a lot of information there, and we'll focus on this number 3 piece for now. So, in all these words here about what the employer is responsible for, the information from identifier, signal words, hazard statement, precautionary statement, pictograms, contact information, as well as we're not just talking about labels here, because labels in the safety identification world, a label is a sign, is a placard, could be a sheet, could be on the batch or electronic element, or even within the operations procedures, instead of just always having to attach labels. And of course, it's a label that needs to be readily understood, whether it be in English or in other languages. If there happens to be the workplace has other workers that are speaking in other languages, that you want to be able to convey the same and readily understood information. So where does the information come from? Well, it comes from the safety data sheet, SDS. And here we're going to take acetone from one particular manufacturer of acetone. And as anybody knows that the hazard communication standard, or maybe as a reminder, it did go through a major update in 2016 to incorporate what's called GHS, Globally Harmonized System. So it is a combination of one international system and then the US system, kind of mashed together, merged together. And that caused for, if we all recall, the original acronym of the safety data sheet was MSDS, for Material Safety Data Sheet, and then changed in 2016 to SDS. So it's a 16-part sheet. It's better organized. However, there are these 4 areas that are most important that really comprises the label or the sign or the placard, which would be the product identifier. And it doesn't always necessarily could be the actual chemical name. It could be the common name of something. So a lot of times too, companies will use a trademark name to identify, but you also would want to actually name the chemical name as well. The other part, at part 2, is the label element, which includes the pictograms, which are these symbols. We'll get those in a moment. And then the actual hazard statements and precautionary statements. And then section 4 of you skip 3, you go to 4, and the information that would potentially go on the label would be a first aid situation, what to do in case there's an exposure to it or spillage of sort. And then you skip the other sections, you move to 8 and how you handle exposure controls, and identifies things that you would wear in lieu of handling, when you are handling the chemical. In this case with acetone, you can see it's eye and face protection is required, skin protection, bottle protection, and respiratory protection. So this is straight from the OSHA doc. As you can see, all that information that you saw before couldn't possibly fit on here, but yet this is how it's done in a summary way and summary statement in a general sense, using the pictogram of the symbols of hazards And then the proper name, you can see even the CAS number is being dropped in here in this particular categories of hazards. And then, of course, the signal word. It's interesting. The signal word is only going to be danger and warning. It's not going to be caution or notice or anything else. It's only those two header type words. And then a summary of the precautionary statements that are selected from that are most important. And we'll get back to that in a moment. And then any contact information that are necessary in case of a situation would arise. So this segment here is what is a statement from the GHS area, and looking very carefully, it says the competent authority may choose to provide a specified layout for the presentation of these and presentation of precautionary information or allow supplier discretion. So what that means is virtually every label is going to be custom in nature. When I say custom, meaning that it will have probably a template to which you as the users would have to adopt, and is usually set up by what they call competent authority, or someone like a hygienist, or someone who's got the professional certificates for safety to decide upon. So going back here, I just want to jump back here. There's pictograms. There are 9 pictograms to identify the level of hazards that are going on here. So for instance, the flame over circle, some of these you will have recognized because a lot of them are repeats over from past symbologies that were used in earlier times or even used in current times with, say, DOT placards. So you'll recognize some of those, and also that their symbology is taken from typical ANSI symbols that are used on safety signs. So flame over circle is going to be your oxidizing elements, whether it be gas, liquids, and solids. The flame symbol, of course, is the flammables and pyrophorics, or pyrophorics actually, and then self-reactives and anything of a flammable nature of things that might be self-heating. The exploding bomb, not pretty self-explanatory. That is something that's going to be self-reactive and organic peroxides. Gas cylinder, things under pressure such as gas, skull and crossbone are going to be your toxicity type products, and corrosion going to be the skin corrosion or eye face damage that could occur, or anything that could be corrosive that impacts metal or any even polymers for that matter. Health hazards, it would be more the carcinogens and respiratory, and even covering any target organ type situations. An environment will certainly be the aquatic toxicities, anything that's maybe that things could spill and head down the sewer and head downstream. And then exclamation marks, kind of a bit of a catch-all. It is in a sense of as an irritant, or some levels of narcotic effects, or respiratory, and anything hazard out there to the atmosphere itself. So these are basic compliance label. I'm going to show some examples of what a label could look like. But again, this goes back to the authority within your organization or within your customer's organization to go in and design and decide what templates to work from. And we can work with any template, or can help design templates, but a lot of it is going to be coming from the person who wants to know what items are going to be shown. And you can see the various symbologies. It isn't just 1 or 2, it could be upwards of 4, it could be even greater. And you can see the layouts whereby the information is spread out across in different ways, but it all touches upon each of the various key elements that are required by GHS. What has eventually happened is that we have seen other changes that go on. You can see PPE symbology show up on the labels. You will also see the NFPA placards showing up on the layouts, and then of course the PPE. So the PPE information on the left are what's called ANSI symbols. The PPE symbols on the right are called ISO symbols, which are more Eurocentric, as we've heard about ISO being from Europe. It's the French organization that has devised a whole symbol. If you've ever traveled in Europe, these are the symbols you would always see on anything and everything, and also even construction sites. You'll see that for PPE there. And it is creeping into the US marketplace, whereby utilizing, and I think they are more effective because they use color backgrounds, so it catches the attention better than the silhouette on white background. Some other different ways, you can see that even the DOT placard has entered some of these labels, and as well as a mixture of all different further layouts. And you can see that they're using a 2D barcode to talk about the precautionary measures and probably first aid and a few other pieces like that, so that someone would take their phone or what have you in an emergency and pull down the information. So there are multiple ways that are starting to even continue to show. And I will tell you, I will walk by our artists on any given day, I will see a GHS HazCom label, sign, or placard being worked on at any point in time here. The other thing that's important is that when you pour into another container from a master container, or say a 55-gallon drum, you go into a portable dispensary situation, that needs to be labeled too, but sort of labeled in a, I guess one could say, in a light manner. So that means just some key information, product information, checking off the boxes or circling the, or assigning or tabbing the labels of the GHS pictograms, and you would place that either onto the bottle, or you place it onto the conveyance can, or attach it. Like, so you see the middle area is actually a tag that you would attach to the around the neck of such. So I do want to, this is a bit of a cautionary thing to be aware of, and I'm using acetone again as an example. You really do need to utilize the safety data sheet to which the actual chemical that it came from, meaning that the generator or the manufacturer of said chemical. All three of these are sheets for acetone. And you look if you look quickly, I didn't want you to read the text, but just look at the the pictograms, the symbols. First one has the first one shows the flammable and the exclamation mark. The middle one shows the flammable and the exclamation mark, as well as the health hazard. But then on the right, far right, you got the flammable, exclamation, and then the environmental. Why these do happen? It's the interpretation to some degree by the manufacturer or the generator of it. And it can be something that can trip people up from time to time. And the cautionary factor that I do want to add is that there are label sign manufacturers that produce what they call standardized chemical GHS/HazCom labels. And they kind of, I guess they pick the best of and this is not an indictment of what other sign and tag and label manufacturers do, but we err on the caution of safety, in which that the information needs to be derived by what's truly being actually used. So in this case, it would be as one would say, instead of using Windex and the operation uses Glass Plus, instead you got to pull the SDS sheet for Glass Plus if you are now substituting it in place of the Windex window cleaner. So to end this, I do want to just point out some of the other hazard communication products that we offer here, and we didn't get a chance to have time to talk about, but of course SDS stations, other labeling devices. This is part of the classic time when before GHS took over, NFPA prevailed, or HMIS prevailed, were the ways to identify chemicals, whether it be on container or in place, to notify the hazards. And to some degree, these were stock products at times. But certainly with the added elements of the specific information from the chemicals, that turned these into more of a customized product when you're adding GHS information. And then once the 2016 rules came through for the update for hazardous communication, we know that MSDS went to SDS, and as well as adding of all these pictograms. And we carry also another element that can be done is you can buy or you can purchase and use just the individual labels that are of the pictograms to apply to the chemical containers as well, and also utilize utilizing the services of a print manufacturer who can offer the elements of a label, sign, or placard that you would use otherwise. So therein ends my discussion or presenting on the labeling of hazardous communication and GHS in the workplace. And I do want to just talk about the disclaimer that we talk about today is that definitely use competent authority because of the fact that we present the information as we know it today, and we are conveying it in a way that it is to be used in a way for informational purposes. But there's any doubt or any questions, even contact OSHA. They do have the lines available to reach out to them. And then, of course, there are consultants in the industry that can help you through these processes. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. Any questions before we wrap it up? All right, well, certainly don't hesitate to reach out if questions come up. Matt, I saw your email. I appreciate you sending me off that information. I will get out the presentations, rep map, as well as any supporting PDFs with Grainger part numbers on them out to everyone. But appreciate you guys spending some time with us this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of the day. We'll talk soon. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thanks, Amanda.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vanna. Bye.